Sensory memory. Look around the room, then close your eyes. For a split second, the image remains, like a photograph fading in sunlight. That brief afterimage is your brain holding raw visual information before deciding whether it deserves your attention. The visual form is called iconic memory, iconic memory. It lasts only a fraction of a second. In classic experiments, people briefly saw rows of letters. They could not report every letter afterward. But when researchers immediately signaled one specific route, they remembered far more from it. The information was there. It simply disappeared before they could describe it. Sound leaves a similar trace called echoic memory. Echoic memory. It lasts slightly longer. That is why someone can speak while you are distracted, and a moment later you suddenly realize what they said. Your brain kept a faint replay running in the background, but sensory memory is not a recording. It is a security camera connected to a shredder. Your eyes, ears, skin, nose, and tongue constantly flood the nervous system with signals. The color of a passing car, the pressure of your shirt, the hum of an air conditioner. Most of it reaches the brain. Almost none of it survives. And here's the clue people miss. Failing to remember something does not always mean you failed to see or hear it. The signal may have arrived perfectly, but attention never selected it. The brain received the package, left it in the hallway, and threw it away unopened. So when something matters, remove competing noise and direct attention before giving the information. Because your senses are generous, attention is ruthless. Whatever survives that cut enters short-term memory. Short-term memory. Short-term memory is where information waits before your brain decides what to do with it. You read a verification code, turn toward your phone, and somehow the final digit disappears. The code was not stored badly, it was stored temporarily. And temporary memory is easy to disturb. Short-term memory keeps a small amount of information active for only a brief period, unless you repeat it, group it, or connect it to something meaningful. But here is the twist. It is not the same as working memory. Short-term memory holds the ingredients. Working memory cooks with them. You can keep a phone number in mind without changing it. But reverse the digits, compare them, or add them together, and now another system has taken over. Interference is one of short-term memory's biggest enemies. A new number, a notification, or one badly timed question can push the old information aside. Like someone wiping a whiteboard before you finish copying it. That is why repeating something once does not guarantee it will reach long-term memory. Repetition keeps the trace alive, but meaning gives it somewhere to attach. Grouping also helps. A long string of digits feels like loose coins rolling across a floor. Break it into familiar chunks and suddenly your brain can carry it in handfuls. So when information matters, remove distractions, group related pieces, and use the information immediately. Write it down. Say it aloud. Connect it to something you already know. That is not cheating. It is giving a fragile memory a bridge before it falls. And when the brain stops merely holding information and starts manipulating it, short-term memory becomes working memory. Working memory. A waiter hears 4 orders, remembers who asked for what, notices one customer changing a drink, and still walks toward the correct table. That is not simple storage. That is working memory. The mental workspace that holds information while you use it. Picture a tiny stage inside your head. The phonological loop, phonological loop, keeps words and sounds active. The visuospatial sketchpad. Visuospatial sketchpad holds shapes, locations, and mental images. But one part decides which actor gets the spotlight, and that is where the real bottleneck begins. The central executive directs attention, switches tasks, and blocks distractions. It sounds powerful. It is not unlimited. A message notification, a second conversation, or one anxious thought can walk onto the stage and shove something important into the dark. That is why multitasking often feels productive while accuracy quietly falls apart. Your brain is not running several complex jobs at once. It is switching between them, paying a small mental fee every time. An episodic buffer helps combine information from different sources with knowledge already stored in long-term memory. It is the reason a spoken instruction, a map, and a familiar landmark can become one usable plan instead of 3 separate fragments. And now the bottleneck makes sense. The problem is rarely that your brain has no information. The problem is that too many things are competing for the same workspace. So unload it. Write down intermediate steps. Finish one demanding task before opening another. Turn complex instructions into visible chunks. You are not weakening your memory by using notes. You are clearing the stage so the right information can perform. Working memory does not need more pressure. It needs less traffic. Long-term memory. Long-term memory is not a vault where finished memories wait untouched. It is closer to a city under construction. Roads strengthen, old buildings change, and some addresses slowly disappear. A new experience begins as a fragile pattern spread across the brain. The hippocampus helps bind its pieces together. What happened, where it happened, and how those details connect. Over time, consolidation stabilizes that pattern through repeated communication between the hippocampus and regions of the neocortex. The memory is not simply dragged from one folder into another. Its network is gradually reorganized, and many memories become less dependent on the hippocampus for retrieval. Sleep can support this process by allowing recent patterns to be replayed and strengthened without the noise of constant new input. That is why studying once for hours can feel powerful while producing a memory that collapses days later. Spaced practice gives the network multiple chances to rebuild, but the most surprising change happens after storage. Every time you retrieve a memory, you do not merely open it. You may make it temporarily flexible. During reconsolidation, new information, your current emotions, or later conversations can become woven into the old pattern before it stabilizes again. Remembering is less like pressing play and more like opening a document, making invisible edits, and saving over the original. This flexibility is useful. It allows knowledge to update instead of freezing forever. It is also the reason confidence cannot guarantee accuracy, a problem that will return when we reach false memories, so do not rely on rereading alone. Test yourself, leave time between sessions, protect your sleep, and connect new information to knowledge you already understand. Long-term memory is not built by staring harder. It is built by returning, retrieving, and rebuilding. Semantic memory. How do you know that water freezes, Paris is in France, or a dog is an animal? You probably cannot remember the exact moment you learned most of it. That is semantic memory. Knowledge separated from the original experience that created it. Episodic memory keeps the classroom, the teacher, and the rainy afternoon. Semantic memory strips away the scenery and keeps the fact. Over time, repeated experiences can blend together until the individual moments fade, leaving behind a general rule. You no longer remember every chair you have ever seen. Your brain extracts the pattern and builds the concept chair. That sounds simple, but there is a hidden trade-off. Semantic knowledge is organized through connected concepts and schemas, mental frameworks that help you understand new information quickly. Mention restaurant, and your brain already predicts menus, tables, ordering, and payment before you enter the building. Schemas save time, but they can also fill gaps with what usually happens instead of what actually happened. That is one reason knowledge can guide memory while quietly reshaping it. Semantic and episodic memory are different, but they constantly trade information. A personal experience can become general knowledge, and existing knowledge helps decide which details of a new experience feel important. So when you learn something new, do not memorize it as an isolated sentence. Connect it to examples, contrasts, and ideas you already understand. A fact with no connections is a loose address. A fact inside a network becomes somewhere your brain can find again. But knowing what a bicycle is completely different from knowing how to ride one. Procedural memory. A patient practices tracing a star while watching his hand in a mirror. At first, the pencil shakes across the page. The next day, he performs better, but insists he has never done the task before. His conscious memory lost the lesson. His nervous system kept the training. That is procedural memory, the system behind skills that become easier through repetition, even when you cannot explain every movement involved. Riding a bicycle, typing without looking, tying your shoes, or controlling the pedals of a car all depend on it. And here's the detail that changes the picture. Procedural memory does not rely on the hippocampus in the same way that facts and personal events do. Skill learning involves networks that include the basal ganglia, cerebellum, and motor cortex. The basal ganglia help turn repeated actions into efficient routines. The cerebellum compares the movement you intended with the movement you actually made, then adjusts timing and precision. It is like a silent coach correcting your body between attempts without delivering a speech. That is why reading about a skill can make you understand it, but cannot make your nervous system perform it. You can memorize every instruction for balancing a bicycle and still fall the moment the wheels move. Procedural memory needs attempts, errors, feedback, and sleep-supported consolidation. Eventually, the task demands less conscious attention. The movements that once crowded working memory begin running in the background. But automatic does not mean permanent. Long breaks, injuries, or poorly repeated technique can weaken or distort a skill. So, practice slowly enough to notice errors, repeat the correct movement, and increase difficulty gradually. Feeling clumsy at the beginning is not proof that you lack talent. It is the nervous system writing a program it has never run before. Prospective memory. You can remember a task perfectly and still forget to do it. You know the package must be mailed, the medication must be taken, or the message must be sent. The intention exists. It simply fails to appear at the moment you need it. That is prospective memory, remembering to perform an action in the future while your attention is busy somewhere else. It has to complete several jobs: store the intention, protect it while you do other things, notice the correct cue, and then interrupt whatever you are doing long enough to act. Miss one step, and the plan stays trapped in your head. There are two main forms. Event-based prospective memory waits for an outside cue. Give someone a document when you see them, or buy milk when you pass the store. Time-based prospective memory depends on the clock. Call at 3, leave in 20 minutes. Take something before bed. Time-based tasks are often harder because no event walks in and taps you on the shoulder. You have to monitor the time yourself, and that competes with working memory and attention. This is why vague intentions fail so easily. "I'll do it later" gives the brain no reliable trigger. It is an appointment with no time, no place, and no alarm. A stronger plan connects the action to a visible event. When I place my dinner plate in the sink, I will send the message. This is called an implementation intention. The cue becomes a mental tripwire, making the action easier to retrieve automatically. External reminders work for the same reason. Put the object in your path. Set an alarm that names the action. Leave the document beside your keys. You are not replacing memory. You are building the cue that memory was waiting for. Good intentions do not fail because you do not care. They often fail because the future never received a clear signal. Episodic memory. The smell of rain hits the pavement, and suddenly you are standing outside your childhood home again. You can see the doorway, hear a familiar voice, and feel the mood of a moment that happened years ago. That is episodic memory. Memory for personal events tied to a particular place, time, and point of view. It does more than preserve facts. It lets you mentally return to an experience. The hippocampus helps bind separate details into one event. The people, the location, the sequence, and the feeling that it happened to you. But here's the part that makes episodic memory dangerous. The brain does not retrieve the event as one untouched file. It reconstructs it. A smell may restore the setting. A photograph may supply a face. Your current beliefs may quietly fill in the missing pieces. The result can feel like a complete movie even when several frames were rebuilt later. This same machinery also helps you imagine the future. When you picture a job interview, a vacation, or a difficult conversation, The brain pulls fragments from earlier experiences and rearranges them into a scene that has never happened. Episodic memory is not just an archive. It is a simulation engine. That flexibility helps you prepare, but it also means every retelling can slightly reshape the memory. A detail emphasized today may become central tomorrow. A detail ignored repeatedly may disappear. So, when an event matters, record the details early before later conversations and assumptions begin editing the scene. And when two people remember the same moment differently, do not assume one must be lying. They may be rebuilding the past from different pieces, because episodic memory does not bring you back to the original moment. It builds the closest version your brain can create now. Emotional memory. The memory that feels strongest is not always the one that is most accurate. A frightening phone call, your first public failure, or the moment someone said exactly what you needed to hear can remain vivid for years. Emotion acts like a highlighter, telling the brain, "This matters, keep it." The amygdala helps assign that emotional importance, while stress hormones and norepinephrine can strengthen consolidation in the hippocampus and other memory networks. That is why emotionally intense events often survive when ordinary days blur together. But the highlighter has a narrow tip. Strong arousal can sharpen the central detail while weakening the edges. You may remember the weapon, but not the person's clothing. The cruel sentence, but not what was said before it. The crash, but not the road signs around it. The brain saves what seemed most urgent, not a balanced report of the entire scene. And this brings back the warning from episodic memory. Vividness is not proof. Flashbulb memories can feel photographic because people remember their shock, location, and confidence. Yet those details may change across retellings while certainty remains high. Emotion does not turn memory into a camera. It turns up the volume on selected pieces. This can also make harmless cues feel dangerous later. A smell, song, or location may reactivate the emotional response before you consciously remember why, because the body can learn associations that conscious recall cannot fully explain. So when an emotional memory matters, separate what you clearly observed from what you felt, learned later, or inferred. Write details down early. Give your nervous system time to settle before making permanent conclusions. Your feelings deserve respect, but they should not be forced to testify as perfect evidence. False memories. Two people leave the same room with completely different memories of what happened inside. Neither is necessarily lying. Memory is reconstructed, and every reconstruction gives the brain another chance to insert the wrong piece. This can happen through the misinformation effect. After an event, a misleading question, photograph, or conversation changes what you later believe you saw. Ask whether a car smashed instead of hit, and the wording itself can push the remembered scene toward greater violence. The original event is still there, but later information has entered the same workspace. Another mechanism is source monitoring error. You remember the detail, but forget where it came from. Did you witness it, imagine it, read it online, or hear it from someone else? The brain keeps the content and loses the label, like finding a photograph with the date and location torn off. False memories often grow around a real skeleton. The place existed. The people were present. The emotion was genuine. But missing details get filled with expectations, suggestions, and the general meaning of what probably happened. This is called gist-based memory. The brain preserves the story's shape while individual facts quietly drift. And repetition makes the problem worse. Each retelling can strengthen the newest version, not necessarily the original one. Confidence grows because the memory becomes familiar, while accuracy may remain unchanged. That is why a person can describe something vividly, consistently, and honestly, and still be wrong. So, when details matter, record them early. Separate what you directly observed from what you heard afterward. Avoid repeatedly rehearsing an assumption as if it were confirmed. And when someone remembers differently, start with curiosity instead of accusation. False memory is not proof that your mind is broken. It is the price of having a memory system built to create meaning, like not preserve perfect footage. Which sign surprised you most? Tell us in the comments, and stay tuned for the next video by liking and subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching.